Welcome back to Inside the Ring. I'm Max Kellerman, joined now by a man who, in his position as president of the WWE, has led the company to record revenue and profitability in each year of his tenure, and prior to that, the co-head of television at CAA, where he represented the biggest names and entities in sports media, negotiating billions of dollars in rights deals, and notably, representing the handsomest man in perhaps the entire world. Mr. Nick Khan.
How you doing? Thanks for having me, Max. Who would that person be? Handsomest man in the entire world.
It's good to finally meet you in person.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's jump right into it, okay? Because there's been this hue and cry in certain quarters of the boxing world about the Ali Act, right? Which people want to leave it unchanged. And I remember interviewing Senator John McCain, who was a huge boxing fan, about the act. I don't remember if he had just passed it or he was trying to pass it at the time. I think it was around 2000. It was his legislation, of course. The idea at the time was well-intentioned, right? They wanted to protect fighters from predatory promoters, basically. How would you evaluate the efficacy of the Ali Act? You've been inside the industry. You've been an attorney, an agent. Now you're an executive. How would you evaluate what you've seen, its effect on boxing?
So first, Max, thanks for having me here. Let's remember what caused Senator McCain, rest in peace, to even propose the Muhammad Ali Act. That was the indictment and ultimate conviction of the head of the IBF, who was convicted for corruption or some sort of similar charge.
They got him on camera.
Correct.
They got him on camera with a payoff.
Correct. Yeah. So that's emblematic of that sanctioning body at that time. And part of the impetus for the Muhammad Ali Act was to make sure that there was a firewall up, that one person couldn't be the promoter, the manager, and also that the sanctioning bodies would not promote fights, because the IBF either pleaded guilty or was found guilty in federal court of corruption.
Right.
So the Muhammad Ali Act was intended with a pure purpose of protecting the fighter. What we're suggesting with the Muhammad Ali Enhancement Act is to leave the Muhammad Ali Act as currently drafted alone. We're not proposing any changes to it. What we're proposing, we call it, is an or. Another option where you can come over and fight for any promoter you want who has its own system that doesn't have to abide by what we think are arbitrary rules of the sanctioning bodies, unfair rules of the sanctioning bodies, which would thereby allow a champion like Terrence Crawford to defend his title against the number one contender, rather than, oh, you have to fight the super champion, the champion in recess, the interim champion, the WBU champion, whatever all the nonsense is. It's that simple.
WBU.
WBU. What did you say years ago?
You just reminded me of this. Apparently to James Toney. What did I tell him?
So he was on your show, and James Toney, who did beat John Ruiz for one of the, sanctioning body belts. Prior to that, James said, I'm the heavyweight champion of the world. And you said, of what world? And he said, I'm the WBU champion, to which you said, WB, you be kidding me. What is that?
I have no recollection, but it's a good line.
It was great.
Yeah.
It was a good line. It was a great line by you. It remains a great line. By the way, in going through Canelo Crawford, which was a great event, and Canelo, great to deal with, Crawford, great to deal with, very strong ringside commentary team. I don't know if you knew for that one.
Oh, that's universally accepted. That's for sure.
Correct.
Yeah.
It was funny because what Dana White and I noticed going into it was the only ones sort of that were difficult to deal with were one of the sanctioning groups.
Right.
I can't stay in a regular room. How dare you put me in a regular room? I must have a suite. What's the square footage of the suite? Where are my ringside tickets? How many will I have? I thought this was a nonprofit organization. All of a sudden, I must have some sort of suite. It was nuts to me. You look at what they're charging the fighters and all of that stuff. And again, if the fighters want to continue with that option, please do so.
I want to get back to that. When you say it's an or, so the fighter at a certain point can opt either into the Ali Act or opt into this other system.
This will also be part of the Ali Act. So we're simply looking to enhance it. Okay. That's why the proposed legislation is called the Muhammad Ali Enhancement Act. We're not looking to get rid of it. We have the support of Muhammad's wife, Lonnie Ali. We have the support of the California State Athletic Commission, which voted 6-0 unanimously to support our position on the Muhammad Ali Enhancement Act. So if you want to continue with the old way of doing it, please do so. No, nothing's changed. If you want an option, we present a
When you
different
say
option.
you mean the fighter.
Correct.
The fighter's the one making a choice at some point. Either I'll do it the way it's been done over the last 20 years, or no, I opt to do this because they're more opportune, or it's just what I choose to do.
That's
an
correct. It's
opportunity
the
I wanna
fighter's
take.
choice. It's further empowerment of the fighter. It gives them an option. If they think, hey, Zuffa is the only U.S.-based promotional company, by the way, the only promotional company in the world that has a U.S. media rights deal with Paramount CBS. Think about that. In our entire lifetimes, when you and I were kids, CBS had boxing, ABC had boxing.
NBC, starting at 4 p.m. Eastern on the weekends. Kids, this actually happened. Starting at 4 p.m. Eastern on the weekends, you didn't even have to know who was fighting. Usually, all three networks had fights, and they were great fights.
Great fights.
Yeah.
And then it migrated to HBO, and it migrated to Showtime, and the networks got out of it. ESPN just got out of the boxing business again. We were able to strike a significant deal with Paramount Plus, which that's new opportunity for fighters. Sure. If you want to fight on different systems that people, are lesser known to people, there's plenty of promoters who have those deals. If you want to actually become a star and show your wares here and come into fights that are strong matchups, but which ultimately will make you a lot of money, come this way.
So boxing has always had a handful of fighters who've made the lion's share of the money, right? They're at the very top of the sport. The rest of the sport, it's not really hyperbolic to say the rest of the sport, the fighters at least, have day jobs. They basically have day jobs. There really hasn't been a major American sports middle class. I mean, by those standards, because for the standards of the rest of the world, that's high class.
Correct.
But by sports standards, a middle class. Like in the NBA, you have the mid-level exception. It's millions and millions of dollars. But there's a middle class in the NBA, the NFL, the NHL, the PGA Tour, right? The UFC has a large, thriving middle class, even though you hear a lot of criticism that at the high end, they can't make as much as the high end they do, the boxers do in line. That's a lot of times the reason they want to go outside the UFC to have some fight against the boxer. Because as Dana White says, it's a one-off where everyone makes as much money as they can. But it's not a sustainable system, really. And we can see boxing's been marginalized increasingly as a result. So what changes can you make? Structural changes can Zuffa Boxing make?
So there's a couple things. Look, I'm not across the business of the UFC, but I'm certainly close with Dana White and have good proximity to it. Conor McGregor has made a ton of money in the UFC. Ronda Rousey, a ton of money. Brock Lesnar, who's now back with WWE, a ton of money. Daniel Cormier, a ton of money. So if it's a meritocracy, if you make it to the top and you're marketable, you get paid. That's how any job should be. Your job, my job, any job. Similarly in WWE, if you're Roman Reigns, if you're Brock Lesnar, if you're Cody Rhodes, all the guys at the top of our game, CM Punk.
They're getting rich.
They're getting rich.
Right.
They're getting rich. If you're in the middle, you're not getting rich, but you have a really good life. In boxing, to your point, it's not that way. It's not that way. There's really only rich or not rich.
There's even richer than at the top of the other sports, and there's like 3 people making that money. And that's it. That's where all the money is.
Look, as you've said a couple times, thankfully, Turki Alashikh was a boxing fan who came in.
Dumb luck. Dumb luck if you're a boxing fan.
Think about if the last 3 to 4 years, if Turki had not come in and done what he's done in boxing, what boxing is there to watch? Like a bunch of nonsense? So what we're proposing also, higher per round minimums for people who are making, fighters who are making lesser money. We're also proposing insurance that starts with the start of training camp. So think about this. Most fighters will only get insurance coverage, fight night insurance coverage. So if it starts at the beginning of training camp and there's an injury in training camp, you get your medical expenses covered rather than, I can't pay this out of pocket, so I'm going to take the fight hurt because I can't get any medical coverage unless I actually fight. So it further protects the fighter. And again, if you don't like what we're proposing, stick with the current way that boxing is going. That will remain intact.
See, when you talk like that, because you've represented fighters, you've been a defense attorney, right? Like people, and I hear you talk about boxing, and I hear Dana talk about it, or Turki Alashikh, and it always seems to me like you guys have to justify amount of time you spend around boxing by claiming, well, look, this is good business. And it is good business. You can generate a lot of revenue in boxing. But to me, that always seems like an excuse. Like, you guys just love boxing and want to be around it. And I mean, I know you and Dana now for 20 plus years. Turki, I've watched from afar, and I've gotten to know him a bit recently. But I see guys who love boxing and just want to be involved. When did that start for you? Like, when did you fall in love with boxing?
Well, look, I grew up primarily in Las Vegas. So I was born in 1974. So if you think back to Vegas at that time in a pre-cable world, a 3-network world prior to Fox, the only professional sport in Las Vegas was boxing. So you read about it in the local paper, you watched it on the local news. That was the sport that was covered. And by the way, for the Vegas folks out there, I'm sure they'll say, well, UNLV Rebels, they were sort of a professional team. Sort of, but not really, right? So it was boxing, and that's what was in town. So when you'd see it in the mid-'80s go from its popularity, not even the height of boxing, that was prior, in my opinion, to the mid-'80s, but from what it was in the mid-'80s to where we are now in 2025, you saw a sport where if I asked you in 1984, keep in mind Tyson wasn't pro yet, the 84 Olympic team, Holyfield and all those greats weren't pro yet. If I said who are the most famous athletes in this country, you got some amalgamation of, okay, Joe Montana, okay, Bird and Magic, team sport people. And then you got Carl Lewis, Mary Lou Retton, Boom Boom Mancini, Sugar Ray Leonard, Jack Nicklaus, John McEnroe, Jimmy Connors. You had the individual sports stars.
Yep.
But as the leagues became the league, Jordan comes in, the NBA soars. Montana, again, the 49ers come in. To me, that's really when the NFL became the NFL. It was post-Steelers of the 70s. And the individual sports stayed the same. So much so, where if I said to you now, who's the fastest man on the planet?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
Correct.
Right.
Where if we went back to 1984 or 1988, and I said, who's the fastest man?
Carl Lewis was the fastest man alive. Yeah.
You got it.
And even not that long, but Usain Bolt, right? Every now and then a guy pops his head up, but usually they're anonymous.
Correct. Something that used to be known. Who's the heavyweight champion of the world? Obviously, you know it. But if you ask the guy on the street, who's Alexander Usyk, they don't know. So part of the issue in boxing is the storytelling that was once there on NBC, ABC, CBS, and subsequently by HBO, who did a fine job with all of that. It's not there anymore.
There was a time when boxing did create crossover stars, and you mentioned like Sugar Ray Leonard's the ultimate example, but I remember going to the cover of Sports Illustrated when I was a kid. There's a little library room in PS 41, and you got to and I go right to the sports magazines, and on the cover of the sports magazines, at least as much as every other sport, if not more, it felt like to me more, Sugar Ray Leonard, Larry Holmes, Roberto Duran, whoever it was, they're largely anonymous now in the United States. So having overseen talent operations at the highest level, how do you fix that star? Like, could you get specific at all? The star deficit problem in boxing. What's the first thing you do?
So one of the first things you do are the storytelling on social media. You said years ago, you said if you pull up to a four-way stop sign, and hey, one corner, I don't know if I have this exactly right. Why don't you tell it rather than me tell it?
You come to a street corner and you see at an intersection guys playing stickball, some flag football, some basketball over here, and a fist fight. Where's the crowd?
Fist fight.
Fist fight. But now you redo the experiment and you say, but it's, back then, your two best tennis players in the world playing. There's MJ and Kobe going one-on-one. There's an anonymous fist fight. Now it's a different distribution.
Correct.
Yeah.
So celebrity matters. So how do you turn someone into a celebrity? Number one, they have to have it in the ring. They have to have the it factor outside of the ring. If they have both of those things, you put them into our machine and get them out there. So even if you've noticed, if you've been watching any ESPN as WWE shifted its premium live events there in September of this year, there's coverage on College Game Day about who do you think's going to win tonight, John Cena or Brock Lesnar. Now, these are established stars. I got it. But the more people can talk about it, the better. Think about this. I thought Terrence Crawford and his team did a phenomenal job post-Canelo fight of getting him out there, doing podcasts the Monday after, doing ESPN hits. If you watch the NFL on Sunday, what's everyone talking about Monday? They're talking about the game. With boxing, it almost feels like once the fight is over, the promoters were like, okay, our night is over, we're done. The night's just beginning.
But because, as Dana says, everything's a going out of business sale. It's not really existing in a continuum like a league or a tour. There's no long-range plan. And you brought up, we've seen a lot of cross-promotion between UFC, WWE, and boxing in the last couple of years.
Yep.
So here's another magazine memory for you, okay?
Please.
There used to be boxing magazines, right? Mm-hmm. And wrestling magazines. But there also used to be magazines that were boxing and wrestling.
Yes.
Covered in the same magazine. Is that the idea with Zuffa Boxing, with TKO, that all things combat sports related are under the same tent, and there's the sum is greater than the whole is greater than the sum of its parts? Is that the idea here?
Look, if you look at WWE and UFC since the merger under the TKO umbrella, which is just 2 years and 2 months ago, right? Recent.
Wow.
And that's it. September.
I would have said like 4 or 5 years. Yeah.
If you look at where the stock price is now, and I don't want to jinx anything here, right? Obviously, it's in a very good spot. It's almost doubled over the last 12 months. Why? Because that marriage is working. So when you have one sponsorship/global partnership team, and UFC has done phenomenal work in that area, WWE, we were a little behind. And all of a sudden you look at the numbers that WWE is producing, which still pale in comparison to what UFC is producing. Look at the sponsorship in boxing. Again, there are a series of one-offs.
The Ali Enhancement Act, right? The criticism to me seems to be logically, if you just take it to its logical conclusion. For example, if you talk about school vouchers, right? The argument against the school vouchers, which is giving parents choice,
Sure.
is that it sucks money out of the public schools, right? Okay, there's an argument, and you could have that argument. The argument here seems to be, which would be against giving the fighters an option, is that Zuffa Boxing, for example, becomes such a money generator that the fighters, of course, would opt into Zuffa Boxing and therefore not have the same protections in the open market that they would otherwise have. But that argument suggests that the fighters would be better off having the option, because the reason they would opt into Zuffa Boxing or whatever entity they're opting into is because that's where the financial opportunity is.
By the way, it seems so obvious, right? The people currently in boxing, they're doing and saying what they should be doing and saying. What's the gentleman's name? Edward Hearns, the British promoter. What is he supposed to say? Oh, TKO's coming, I'm going to fold?
Right.
So let him criticize. Let the gentleman who runs the WBC, and I'm hearing they're going to strip Crawford of his championship because he's not paying a unilaterally dictated to, sanctioning fee. He won that fight. We were there, but he's not going to be the champion. It seems preposterous to me. But of course, they're saying what they should be saying, which is, oh no, this is no good. They're not looking out for the fighter. Again, what's their alternative? To say TKO's coming, let's just go out of business?
No, their alternative, Nick, would be to say, oh, okay, they're starting a new business. Good luck to them. I have my business over here. Like, why say anything? What it suggests is a sense that the other promoters feel threatened because it's not going to be business as usual, because like you guys have an idea that seems to be dangerous to the status quo. And the defense of the status quo is absurd, because boxing has been completely, in the United States, completely marginalized.
Correct. So to your point, in terms of, I'm saying, hey, they're saying what they should be saying. You're saying, hey, it feels like they feel threatened. At WWE, we see everything as our competition, including someone just staying home on a Saturday night and looking at their phone and texting friends and watching TikTok. Dana White and the UFC will tell you the same thing. So when I see things like the NFL on Christmas Day last year and the Beyonce halftime show, that inspires me. That's our competition. I'm not suggesting we're yet in the same league as the NFL, but I look at them and say, wow, they really nailed that. They nailed it so much that you saw the other networks on Thanksgiving Day this year with their halftime shows, right? To show that, hey, Netflix, you can do the Beyonce show, we can do the Jack White and Eminem, show, which I thought was great, and it was a smart idea. That's what we're looking at, is how do we compete with them? So when we get our numbers coming off of Black Friday from Fanatics, what we're curious to know is, where are we compared to the NFL, NBA, NHL, MLB? And by the way, soon we're going to take the spot of one of those entities. Assume it's not the NFL or NBA, but we're going to take that spot, and that's where we want to go. It's the same with boxing. I don't care what any of the other promoters are doing. I don't care what these sanctioning groups are doing. What I care about is putting on the best product we can for the fans, having the right fighters with us, and elevating the sport so everybody can make money.
Because you're competing with every form of entertainment in the world.
Correct.
Right.
Even when we look at scheduling events in UFC, Dana does the same thing. When are the big blockbuster movies coming out? I don't want to go up against that. By the way, Zootopia 2, which came out, if you looked at that box office, globally, it was off the charts. Okay, so it's a kid's movie, but most kids go to the movies with their parents. So that took a lot of people off the grid. Is any of that even thought about in the boxing space?
So boxing becomes a year-round content-generating machine, ideally. What does, before I let you go, you're very generous with your time, what does a successful first year of Zuffa Boxing look like?
Competitive fights and fighters who start to become known in the United States, in the United Kingdom, in Mexico, and beyond that, in addition to some of the mega fights with the already existing stars. But our purpose is, let's provide the platform, let's provide the promotional muscle, let's get the right fighters in place. And by the way, we're going to announce some pretty interesting fighters. You'll know them. The guys on this show will know them. Some people may not know them, but they've already been on these other networks. They're coming this way. And of course, we're not going to interfere with anyone's contract and all of that nonsense. We'll do it the right way.
All right. Music to my ears, and I'm very excited about what's coming up in a little over a month?
A little over a month. And by the way, thank you for having me on. The show's been great. You should be really happy with what you've done with boxing on this show.
It's a fun show. It's a
great
fun show to do, yeah.
By the way, I didn't know Shady McCoy knew boxing the way that he knows it.
Dude.
I knew Coppinger did. I knew you did. Shady's been great.
He's been absolutely great. Yeah, this is this is just, there's never been a boxing show like it. There really hasn't. It's a fun show to do.
Also, the guest recurring fighters, like even hearing what Andre Berto had to say, like phenomenal. Great work.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
And, man, I look forward to next year.
We'll see you there.